Hello, nice to see you on my channel, Hearts and Shadows. Enjoy watching.
My name is Patrick. When my wife's friends told her to leave the house for a week just to teach me a lesson, I did the last thing she ever expected me to do. I had seen the way her friends influenced her for a while, and I had warned her about the kind of advice they gave and how it never seemed to bring anything good into our marriage. But she didn't listen. So when they convinced her to pack a bag and leave our home just to punish me, I didn't react the way they all thought I would. I just did the one thing she didn't see coming. When I think back to how it all started, the beginning was peaceful. Maria and I had been married for 7 years, but our story really began long before that. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot, and for most of that time, we were in a long-distance relationship. We'd visit each other when we could, call every night, and text throughout the day. Honestly, we rarely fought. That distance didn't really test us like people say it usually does. In fact, it made the anticipation of being together more exciting. We thought that if we could survive the distance, we could survive anything. But what we didn't realize back then was that love, as strong as it might be, doesn't prepare you for the daily realities of living with another person. After the wedding, everything changed subtly. We moved in together for the first time. Suddenly, we were sharing the same bed, the same bathroom, the same kitchen every day. I had lived alone for years before we got married. I was used to my own rhythm, my own space, and suddenly I had to consider someone else in every little thing. It wasn't bad, it just took time. Adjusting to having someone always around, always involved in your personal routines, takes a mental shift. Still, I welcomed and loved her. I believed she loved me, too. That mutual affection and connection were our foundation. She made the effort to move to my city after the wedding so we could start our life together here. That move meant starting over for her in many ways. We spent evenings looking for job openings together. I'd send her links, she'd apply, and after a few weeks, she landed a role at a bank as a customer service representative. She was excited about it. She settled into her new role quickly, and like anyone would, she started making friends with people at work. I wanted her to build her own community here, have her own life beyond just being my wife. That was the atmosphere in our marriage back then, supportive, loving, and full of hope. When we got married, we both agreed that rushing into parenthood wasn't necessary. It wasn't a difficult conversation at the time because we were both ambitious and wanted to build solid careers before bringing kids into the picture. We told ourselves, let's give a few years, save some money, grow in our respective fields, and enjoy the freedom while we have it. And for a while, it actually worked. Maria thrived in her job. Within a few years, she got promoted to head the entire customer care unit at her bank branch. To celebrate, I made dinner reservations at her favorite restaurant. We ordered a full-course meal. At some point between the main course and dessert, I brought up something. I think we're in a good place now. Maybe it's time we started thinking about having a child. I said. She smiled. Then she changed the subject, saying we should just enjoy the night and focus on her promotion. I didn't argue. It was her moment, and I didn't want to dampen it. But what I thought was a one-time deflection quickly turned into a pattern. Every time I brought up the topic afterward, whether casually, during a weekend walk, or while planning for the next year, she'd either avoid the conversation or shut it down altogether. Her words were always the same. Now's not the time. At first, I chalked it up to stress or work overload. But as months passed and her tone grew sharper whenever the subject came up, I started to feel uneasy. This wasn't just postponement anymore. This felt like resistance. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the first real crack in the foundation of our marriage. One Tuesday, I had wrapped up work earlier than usual. I didn't tell Maria I was coming home early. But the moment I walked through that front door, I had no idea I had stepped into something I wasn't meant to witness. My wife was sitting in the living room with her friends. I didn't recognize one of them, but the other had visited once or twice before. They seemed to be having a good time. I said a polite hello, and they acknowledged me. I figured I'd let them enjoy their moment, so I went straight to the bedroom. I wasn't looking to eavesdrop, but walls in this house aren't thick, and they weren't whispering. At first, I tried to tune it out. But one of them was bragging about how she finally blocked her second ex-husband. She kept repeating how marriage was a scam and how she felt free now. The other one casually said she was still seeing a man who, by her own admission, was very much married. She laughed as she said his wife knew but couldn't do anything about it, then called the situation a sign from the universe that she was meant to have him. I sat and listened in disbelief. I couldn't believe these were the women my wife was choosing to spend her time with. The conversations were filled with bitterness, entitlement, and a strange kind of pride in tearing relationships apart. It wasn't girl talk. It wasn't venting. It was poison, and they were serving it like a joke. When they finally left a couple of hours later, I waited a bit before bringing it up. I approached Maria calmly and told her that I was uncomfortable with the kind of things I overheard. I explained that I didn't think people who brag about failed marriages or dating married men were the kind of voices anyone should be taking relationship advice from. Instead of listening, she snapped. Immediately, told me I was spying, that I lacked boundaries, and that I had no right to judge her friends. I was stunned. The conversation shut down fast. She refused to hear anything I had to say and doubled down, acting like I had no right to question the company she kept. That was the moment I knew these friends were already influencing her, and she couldn't see it. After that confrontation about her friends, I watched my wife slowly turn into someone I didn't recognize. Every time she came back from spending time with those friends, it felt like she brought pieces of their bitterness into our home. She'd sit quietly at first, almost waiting for something to go wrong. Then, out of nowhere, she'd accuse me of anything and everything. At one point, she claimed I wasn't leading like a real man should. These were things she never said before, never even hinted at. It was like someone had handed her a checklist of things to be angry about. I tried not to overreact. But then one night, she came home late, and when she walked through the door, I smelled alcohol, like she'd been out drinking heavily. That wasn't like her. She wasn't the type to go out partying, especially not on a weekday. And I suspected exactly what it would likely come from those same friends who laughed about reckless living like it was something to be proud of. I gently asked her about it, saying, "Hey, are you okay? This isn't like you." But instead of talking to me, she exploded. Said I was trying to cage her, that I was threatened by her freedom, that I wanted to keep her small. She said, and I'll never forget this, she said I was trying to ruin her body by pushing for a child. That I wanted to trap her in motherhood while I stayed free. I didn't know how to respond as I stood there, completely stunned. Then she turned and walked away. After that night, things got even colder between us. We lived in the same house, but it was like we were strangers. She'd leave for work without a word, come home and head straight to the bedroom. When I tried to start a conversation, she'd give me one-word answers or flat out ignore me. It was like my presence irritated her. I gave her space. I hoped maybe it was just a phase, something she'd snap out of. But days passed, then a week, and the silence became normal. The warmth that once made our home feel like home was gone. All that remained was tension and the growing sense that I was being slowly pushed out of my own marriage. One morning, the sun hadn't even fully come up yet, and I walked out into the hallway to use the toilet and saw her by the closet, zipping up a small travel bag. There was no planned visit, no conversation about needing to be somewhere. So I asked, "Where are you going?" At first, she didn't even look at me, just kept folding a few shirts and placing them neatly in the bag. When she finally spoke, she said she was going to stay with one of her friends for a while. I asked why. She said our marriage wasn't working the way it should, and she thought we needed some time apart. According to her, this was the best way for us to both figure out what's next. I stood there, confused and trying to wrap my head around what was happening. We hadn't been talking much over the past week, that part's true. Things had fell off, but I never thought it would lead to this. So I tried to reason with her. I told her that every relationship hits rough patches and that we didn't need to separate to work things out. I even offered therapy, something we'd never tried. I was willing to sit down with a professional and have the hard conversations if it meant saving what we built. But she didn't even flinch. She just shook her head and said we needed a break. Just 1 week apart, according to her. I didn't know what else to say. I felt helpless. It's one thing when you argue and slam doors. It's another when the person you love quietly checks out and packs a bag like it's no big deal. She walked out without even looking back. As soon as the door closed behind her, I felt this tightness in my chest. I couldn't pretend everything was fine and just go to work like it was any other day. So I called in sick, told them I wasn't feeling well. Thankfully, my boss gave me a couple of days off. And for most of that day, I just sat, replaying every moment, every argument, and every red flag I chose to ignore. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about space or needing time to reflect. It was a pattern. I might still love her, but I couldn't ignore what she was showing me. If she was willing to leave this easily, if she couldn't fight for us even when I was ready to do everything possible to make things work, then there was nothing left to save. I didn't want it to come to this. But after everything that had happened, I opened my laptop and started searching for a divorce lawyer near me. Divorce was never a word I imagined would be part of my story. I thought we'd be one of those couples who fought through it, figured things out, maybe even grew old side by side. But there's a point where love stops being enough, when disrespect, distance, and manipulation replace it. I found a lawyer with good reviews. I booked an appointment for the next morning. I barely slept that night. At the meeting, the lawyer didn't sugarcoat anything. He walked me through the entire process: property division, timelines, legal notices, and the emotional toll that usually comes with it. I gave the go-ahead, told him to file the papers. On the 5th day of her being gone, she got the papers. Within hours, she messaged me, said I was bluffing, said this was my way of manipulating her to come back. I just stared at the message for a while. Then I typed out my reply. I'm not bluffing. The marriage is over. I didn't need to argue or explain myself anymore. I had spent years trying to hold that relationship together. That evening, I got back from work, tired and drained. I hadn't even taken off my shoes when I saw her. She was standing in the living room. The moment our eyes met, she rushed toward me, almost like she was relieved to see I still came home. Her voice was shaky, nervous. I didn't think you'd actually go through with the divorce, she said. I didn't say anything right away. She continued, her tone a mix of panic and guilt, asking me to withdraw the papers, saying we could still fix this if I just gave it time. But something in me had already shut down. I just looked her dead in the eyes and said, you walking out of this house was the last straw for me. This marriage is done. And I walked past her. She didn't follow at first. But later that night, while I was sitting in the backyard trying to collect my thoughts, she came and sat beside me. This time, she wasn't defensive. Then, in a soft voice, she said it was her friend's idea. They told her to leave for a week, that if she disappeared, I'd come crawling and stop asking about having a baby. I just looked at her and laughed. It was so ridiculous and sad that she actually listened. Well, I told her, now you're free. Go be with your friends. Maybe they'll help you get through the divorce, too. She broke down, trying to grab my hand, saying she didn't want to be like them. She didn't want to end up divorced, bitter, and alone. That this wasn't how she thought things would go. But I had made up my mind. I told her straight, if you're willing to hurt your husband to impress people who couldn't hold their own marriages together, then you don't deserve to have one either. She kept begging, even as the days passed. But I didn't move. I didn't look back. If she could leave that easily once, she'd do it again. The divorce process wasn't quick, but by the time the papers were signed and everything was finalized, I had already moved on. Her begging didn't stop. She sent messages, called at odd hours, and even showed up unannounced a few times. She wanted me to undo what I had already accepted, that this marriage couldn't be saved. But I stood firm, not because I hated her, but because I finally understood that loving someone doesn't mean tolerating repeated disrespect, especially when they don't see anything wrong with it. Eventually, the court made it official. The marriage was dissolved. Everything we shared was divided. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm happy about how things ended. This isn't how I pictured my marriage story turning out. No one gets married thinking, one day this person will walk out because her friends told her to. It hurt, but sometimes feeling relief feels better than sadness. I don't have to worry about coming home to silence, to passive-aggressive remarks, or to a woman who lets others think for her. I don't have to wake up wondering which version of her I'll get that day, the warm partner I fell in love with, or the stranger her friends trained her to become. If you're listening to this and you've gone through something similar, or you're in the middle of it now, let me say this. You're not crazy. You're not asking for too much. A relationship should be between two people, not three, not four, not a panel of so-called friends who cheer for your relationship to fail just because they failed at theirs. A spouse who lets outsiders poison their home doesn't deserve the trust and loyalty that comes with marriage.